In 1692, in the town of Salem, Massachusetts, more than 200 people were accused of being witches and practicing witchcraft, and 20 people were executed throughout the time of the trials. The Puritans defined witchcraft as entering into contact with the devil in exchange for the power from the devil to do evil. So witchcraft was considered a great sin to the Puritans because it denied God's superiority. Salem wasn't alone in its problems with the witches. Witch trials also swept all of Europe from the 1300s to the 1600s, and tens of thousands of people were executed. These hunts for witches were greatly influenced because of the fear of the devil. Puritans believed that he could give a person power to hurt another person for their loyalty to the devil. The main factors that started the trials had to do with politics, religion, family feuds, economics, and the imagination and fear of the people. There are also more speculations of why the town of Salem believed in witchcraft. The 1600 time period was a very religious one, and along with that, they were very superstitious. So when the trials came about, many of the townspeople were very likely to believe it was true. Also, the preachers from the time told the population to fear anything satanic, so that is what the public did.
A special court was established for the Salem Witch Trials, called the Court of Oyer and Terminer. It was composed of Jonathan Corwin, John Hawthorne, Bartholomew Dietrich, and Thomas Danforth. This court would hear their testimonies, and if they suspected the accused of being guilty, they would send them to jail to await trial. The trial was finite. Grand jury declared if the accused was guilty and therefore hung, or if the accused was innocent and set free. The prisons that the accused were kept in while they awaited trial were terrible places filled with innumerable atrocities. There were no bathrooms. However, some cells had a small bucket in the corner for the captives to alleviate themselves. Hygiene was not taken into account while constructing the prisons, and they were never intended for long-time use. In the summer, the cells were sweltering, and in the winter, they were very cold, any light, and flooded annually, leaving the prisoners in water up to their knees. For one accused of witchcraft, it was required for them to be bound by rope or iron shackles for months on end. If a captive tried to escape, they were immediately executed on assumption that they were guilty. While the accused witches stayed in these prisons, the church conducted endless examinations and interrogations trying to break the prisoners into a confession. During the Salem Witch Trials, as many as 150 people were waiting for trials at the same time. At the same damn time. Of the 114 total people that were arrested, 43 were tried, and 27 of those 43 were sentenced to death. 19 of those 27 were hung, and 1 was pressed to death. 12 died in prison, waiting for trial, and 2 were found innocent, but could not pay back their prison fees, so they were sentenced to slavery.
The most famous witch trials had to deal with Abigail Williams, John Proctor, Betty, and Reverend Parris, also the main characters in Arthur Miller's The Crucible. Reverend Parris was invited to Salem by Thomas Putnam. Little did he know Betty would begin convulsing, twitching, and contorting her body. With few answers and many questions, Parris was as confused as Mr. Smead trying to post a last-minute surprise, little screw-us-over the night before test on headline. Unfortunately, Cotton Mather provided an easy scapegoat for the town with his book, Memorable Providences, which talks about the dangers of witchcraft. Many other outbreaks came into light with Ann Putnam, Mercy Lewis, and Mary Walcott. A doctor was then sent to Salem to examine the girls. He found witchcraft to be the only answer. The first to be accused was Reverend Parris's slave, Tituba. In desperate need of answers, Mary Sibley proposed an idea that Tituba bake a cake, made of urine from the witching victims, and feed the cake to the dog for deeper insight on the witches. These actions only solidified the town's belief that Tituba was a witch. More girls began to fall victims of witchcraft, while Betty and Abby began accusing more and more townspeople, and the true hysteria started. Many people believed that the girls band together accusing people they didn't like. The examinations of the accused commenced. The girls told stories of the accused dancing in the woods, attacking them, and possessing them. The courts would repeatedly ask, "Are you a witch?" Afraid of being executed, Tituba confessed to witchcraft. Tituba spoke about Satan coming to her and asking her to sign his book and do his work for him. It is reported that more and more women were being attacked by the group of girls. Martha Corey, Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Coley, and Mary Easty. Most accused women eventually confessed due to the fear of execution. One of the main characters in The Crucible, John Proctor, was openly accused of witchcraft. In return, Proctor called the girls out on making up the witch attacks. Due to Proctor's unwillingness to confess a crime he didn't commit, he lost his life, but his wife's life was spared due to her pregnancy. Another well-known execution was the one of Giles Corey, who was pressed to death with stones. Months after Giles's death, his wife Martha was one of the last victims to be executed. By the fall of 1692, many began doubting the witch theory, and many of the accusers had disappeared, thus ending the Salem Witch Trials.
The Salem Witch Trials will forever be remembered in history as one of the biggest blunders and loss of innocent lives in early American society. Over 20 innocent lives were lost due to the flaws and corruption of the Salem court systems. Although it didn't seem like it, many people were aware of the problems with the courts, but held their tongues in fear that they too would be accused of witchcraft. One major flaw was that if you were accused and confessed, you were allowed to live, and you were asked to name other witches. But if you denied it, you almost certainly were sentenced to die. This backward system caused a snowball effect so that more and more people were accused and lost their freedom, and sometimes their lives.
In 1697, 5 years after the trials, one of the head judges asked the churches of Salem to forgive him for his sins because he believed that he had sentenced many innocent people to their graves. In 1703, the Massachusetts General Court threw out most of the witch trial evidence, not officially recognizing it as valid evidence. And in 1711, the colony compensated many of the families of the victims with large sums of money in hope that it would ease some of their pain.
Permanent changes were made to the court system following the trials, such as the abolishment of spectral evidence, that is SPECTRAL, Elizabeth, which made it so one could say that they saw the spirit of another tormenting them, and it was considered to be concrete evidence. The courts eventually stopped trying cases of witchcraft altogether because of the mass devastation and death that occurred because of these trials. These horrible events helped to push American history into the scientific revolution, or the Enlightenment, which focused on logic, reason, and science rather than traditional belief or religious laws. Although the trials were so appalling, they helped to change America for the better and helped it to progress into the great nation that we have today.